Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this Infosec webcast on how ChatGPT and AI are changing cybersecurity. My name is Jeff, and I'll be moderating the session today. Yeah, if you don't know Keatron, he is our VP of Portfolio and Product Strategy. You've probably seen him if you have attended any of our other webinars or gone to different conferences where he speaks or watched any of our training videos that he records. So just a quick preview here of what to expect. Keatron is going to review ChatGPT a little bit and talk a little bit how malicious actors are using them. Going to talk a little bit about how cybersecurity professionals can incorporate these tools into their workflows. And then probably the part that's most exciting, going to see a demo of how he uses some of these tools to, teach cybersecurity and how you can use them in different ways to help you do different tasks. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Keatron, and take it away.
All right, let's get started. So first thing we got up here, and again, thanks to everyone for joining. I'm looking forward to sharing some of these new things with you. But first up, we have some statistics here that deal with just users and valuation, training data, for 3.4 GPT and all that good stuff. But these things they change, right? Like they constantly go up. But the point of this whole slide is just that the popularity of generative AI, the way that it's going, it's a ship that's sailed and it's not coming back, right? So you either have to get on board and start learning it, or in a few years, you may just be left behind with how to go about doing things. Now, one of the things that I do want to kind of stress here before we get into anything is there's a whole thing called responsible AI. It's a whole study and a whole way of doing things. And I just want to say that I just spent some time like this week out at a big company helping to develop some stuff around this. And one of the things I want to say as we go into this is everything that I demonstrate to you, no matter what it is, I would say that you should make sure that it's okay for you to do the things that I'm demonstrating with your company. So for example, there's a part in the demo section where I'm going to take some like task manager data or netstat data from a machine and put it in ChatGPT and get it to tell me insights. Okay, what I need you to understand is if you do that to a machine, especially if it's a device or something that is your company's device or something your company owns, you could inadvertently be putting some confidential data into ChatGPT without even realizing it, especially if you don't even know what you're looking at in netstat. So what I would encourage you to do is if you're going to experiment with these things, do it responsibly. And by that, I mean, if you're going to do it on company devices, on company time, or on company networks, you should get permission and guidance from your organization on how to do this safely per that organization's standards. Now, if you're going to experiment at home on your own machines or on your own VMs, you still need to exercise some of that caution. Because again, as we all work from home now, the lines are blurred between the data that's on your device that's yours versus the data that is, your company's. So what I'm saying is just be careful. And now that I got that out of the way, let's get into the fun and start having some fun with this. Now, I'll reiterate that again once I start the demo. And as I go through it, I'll talk about here's where you could be getting yourself in trouble if you're doing this on a work device. So what is ChatGPT? Let's just start with the basics. Generative pre-trained transformer. It uses a combination of supervised deep learning, reinforcement learning through human feedback. And there's different variations of this, that we'll talk about as well. Is there any talk of segregating ChatGPT or other like AI products? Yeah, there's not just talk of that. That's possible. There are solutions you can purchase from providers where they give you a service, and the large language models or the foundation models, if we're talking Amazon, Bedrock or something like that, you can have that in your closed off environment inside Amazon or wherever it may be. So we're not limited now to just using public facing access types of large language models like this. So OpenAI is definitely one of the more popular, but it's definitely not the only route that you can go, especially if you have budget to spend. All right, so in human terms, it's an AI platform that consumes all the text it's able to find on the internet. With the old database, just up to 2021, it uses that text to build context around and answer questions you ask it. Now, I'm not going to get into the math and all that stuff and embeddings and how hallucinations happen and all these things, because I know some people are going to have some questions around all that stuff, and we can talk lightly about that, but I don't want to waste an hour getting into the theory without kind of getting into really just the hands-on and showing you how this actually works. So with GPT-4 and even with with different other large language models, you're not limited to just the data up to 2021 anymore. There's plugins, browser plugins, and things like that that you can use to go and pull in other data. All right, so that's something that you have to be mindful of. How is it different from Google? Because some people have literally asked me this question. I'm surprised how many people have asked this question. But Google just searches through large databases and returns pages with content related to that search. It doesn't actually perform or create anything. Whereas ChatGPT searches, consumes, and creates something based on your request. It understands context and improves the more we use it, all right, as is the case with most AI. Now, how are malicious actors using it? Let's talk about that first because we can't skip over that, okay? So social engineers can make better phishing templates. Now, as an organization, we have an Infosec IQ product that actually does phishing simulations. And one of the things that we, as an educator for the world on cybersecurity things, one of the things that we've always educated people on is like, look, when you get an email, look for bad punctuation, bad grammar, and stuff like that if they're trying to get you to buy something or click on something, because if the grammar and the English is bad or the punctuation is bad, then it's most likely a phishing attack. So that used to be literally one of the things that we told people to look for. But guess what? As these threat actors have leaned into ChatGPT, large language models, foundation models, and other types of, this type of technology, generative AI technology, those emails have exquisite language. They're written as if a college professor in English wrote those email phishing attacks and sent those out. Why? Because they're using these models and this technology to make those phishing attacks and make those emails more convincing. Now, let me tell you something else that we know for a fact they're doing. Not only are they making the grammar and things like that better with those phishing emails, they're actually using tools to go out and do data carving on your website, on your organization, taking all that knowledge back as text, putting it in a large language model like ChatGPT or something, telling it to generate things like an email or generate 10 emails that's likely to get these people that work in this organization to click on it based on the things that you've learned about this organization. And let me tell you, some of those emails are frighteningly good as far as the likelihood of someone clicking on those emails. So that's a whole thing that threat actors have leaned into that's making it better. Hackers can learn more about their targets in a short amount of time. Ransomware operators will become more efficient. What that means is when you think about what ransomware operators do. So first off, we have to understand that ransomware is not, and I've said this in ransomware webinars, ransomware is not how they got into your environment. Ransomware is a symptom of another control failing somewhere, and they got into your environment because that control failed. And then once they're in, ransomware is something that they do after. Okay? Now, one of the things that you do with ransomware oftentimes is you have to do a little bit of discovery when you get inside the environment, because you have to find the things and know what things it is you need to encrypt. Doing that discovery using, something like ChatGPT, just from running NetStat and other things on machines that you have compromised, can give you insights a lot faster. So you can move horizontally a lot faster. things like PowerShell and other ways that we commonly see ransomware operators moving horizontally inside environments, you can do those things much faster. They can build that stuff much faster. Okay. So when it comes to recon, when it comes to doing reconnaissance to figure out how to get into your environment, again, ransomware operators can do that more effectively because they can go out and pull a whole bunch of data about your organization and have ChatGPT or another generative AI tool summarize using something called summarization, summarize that information for you and give you bullet points of the things you need to focus on. Right? Now, keep in mind, with ChatGPT, there are some guardrails in there that tries to keep you from doing things malicious. But we also have to understand there's a whole host of open source, large language models, generative AI platforms that are out there that don't have any of those guardrails because they're open source. They're not meant to really be trying to restrict people. They're meant for research. So keep that in mind when you think about some of the stuff that you're not able to do. Now, in this example, we're simply looking at an example here. Now, for those of you that are Office fans, you'll get this. Basically, find out about the company Dunder Mifflin and create an email employees of the company are likely to open and follow instructions for. When I gave it this prompt, all it did is it went out, looked at information about the office, about Dunder Mifflin. So all the stuff on Wikipedia, et cetera, up to 2021 at the time that I took this screenshot. And it grabbed all that information and it quantified that into this email that says, all hands meeting tomorrow, exciting news, team building, and lunch on us. Basically, that captures everybody in the office because you know how that one of the themes of that show was they love to do these all hands meetings. The general manager, Michael, did. The one person that hated the meetings was Stanley, but the way that you would get Stanley is free lunch, right? So everything that we need to ensure that people come to that meeting or even click on this email is in there. It says, we hope you find this well. We have scheduled all hand meetings tomorrow in the AM in the conference room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at the bottom, there's a thing that says, click to register, to pick your meals, like what meal you want from this restaurant. So this is an example of something that was completely created with generative AI. I didn't type a single line of this email, and it would be very convincing. Now, another example here, a little more technical. What I'm asking it to do here is simply saying, write a Python script to scan a website for all open ports. Now, whether or not that's malicious, that's a subjective thing because as a pen tester, I could do that. And even as just someone that owns a website and I want to see what's public facing, I could scan my own website. But as you can see here, it went ahead and did it in Python. And this is a very efficient little Python script that will scan a website or scan an IP address or domain for open ports and come back and tell us what ports are open. And this is something, some of the tools that we use to do this in practice are like Nmap and other things. This does a similar function at a very basic level, right? So imagine not having a piece of malicious software. Imagine being able to tell Gen AI to create that malicious piece of software while you're in the environment or right as you get ready to get into the environment. Right? That changes the game. It's a whole different ball game at that point. So we're going to continue to see innovations like this, and I'm just going through and showing basically the results of actually running the scripts. In these examples, it was mostly 3.4, and some of them it'll be 4. The demonstrations that I'll show you live will be using 4. All right, so what are some cybersecurity uses? Well, coming up with solutions faster, learning to use new cybersecurity tools faster, and writing reports. Because let me tell you, the part of my business, like as far as pen testing and threat hunting and all that stuff, the part that I despise the most is writing reports. I don't love writing reports. I don't. But using large language models, of course, internally, my report writing has went from like a 2 to like a 10, right? Because I can go in and put in my bullet points of the things that matter, put in the screenshots that matter. Again, don't go put this on ChatGPT because you're putting confidential information out there. And I can get it to generate very, very good reports without me having to hire someone to just write reports. Okay. Now, here's an example. I'm asking it, what is the Wireshark filter to capture all traffic between Keatron.com and FedEx.com? I want to see communications of where I went to their website to ship something. Well, it actually gives me the filter. And this filter is exactly correct. And I can just go copy code and put that filter in Wireshark, and it'll actually work. And I'm going to demonstrate that using another example. Now, learning faster with ChatGPT and AI. Traditional teaching takes much longer as students need to build a foundation of commands and syntax and things like that. And what I've learned over the last 20 years of, helping to educate people and trying to teach technical information to people that are not technical yet is that if you get people too caught up in the syntax and trying to remember the syntax and trying to remember all the commands, the whole strategy and the whole learning objective of what it is they're trying to learn gets lost because it takes too much time and too much of their brain power to focus on memorizing those commands. So I've heard it from students for years where we'll do like a 1 hour hands-on exercise and they were struggling with the syntax so much trying to remember it that when we got to the end, they're like, okay, I made it to the end, but I don't know what I just did because I was so focused on getting these commands right and my typos and things like that. This allows us to get over that hurdle to where they can go from novice to actually being effective pretty quickly. Now, I know somebody's going to have some questions. Well, don't we still need expertise? And the answer is yes. I'm going to demonstrate exactly why that is. All right. So let's look at the demo really quickly here. Now I'm going to share my screen. And we will come back and answer questions. And what I want to show you is this Windows one here. So I just want Jeff or Casey, can you verify that you're seeing my screen here?
Yep, we see it.
All right, excellent. So what I'm going to do with this machine, first off, we're going to just look at some of the simple examples. So this is a case that I used to give students, and I'll make this available for you all to download. We'll figure out a way to do that. So this is a case I used to give people in the threat hunting class. I'd give them this document that I wrote up. You got to answer these 21 questions about this traffic capture. And you have to use Wireshark and Zeek and some other things to do, analysis and hunt through that traffic for some malicious indicators of compromise. So with that, generally it would take me 2 or 3 days to manually walk a student through how to do these things, how to get the syntax down, and remember the right steps. What I can do here, though, is in this little explanation, it gives you kind of like what's going on. It tells you that one of the target IPs is 131, that's the victim. So it gives you some information that you can kind of go off of without having to know everything. So one of the things it says in there is, look, we know for sure there's something going on. And let's open this packet capture in Wireshark here. All right, the instructions say we know there's something going on between 131 and 177 on this network. So I gave the instruction, look at the traffic that is happening just between 131 and 177. And once you look at that traffic, bring me that output, okay? Now, a novice wouldn't know the Wireshark syntax to do that. And if you Google that, the stuff you find on Google may be conflicting. But I can take that simple instruction as a novice and go right out and say, how would I create a Wireshark filter. We'll just say display filter. Having trouble stretching my fingers up and typing here. To only show traffic between, and remember, these are given in the instructions, 131 and 177. So I give it that prompt, and it comes back and shows me, like, this is the filter to do that. And not only does it give me the filter, the syntax, but it gives me context around what each part of that filter does and why it works. It even tells me how to open Wireshark, just in case we didn't know how to do that. So I'm going to take that filter, trust what it says, come in here, paste that filter right into, let me just make this a little bit bigger here. And it does exactly what I asked it. It gives me traffic just between those two IPs. And now I can isolate on that and see what's going on with those IPs. Now, the second thing in instructions, I might say, once you isolate on traffic between those two, see if there's anything in there that shows that they were doing something they weren't supposed to, like trying to visit Facebook or TikTok or something like that. So now that's the only instruction I give. But we can go out now to ChatGPT and say, how would I create a filter in Wireshark to look for traffic to, let's just start with Facebook. Let's say to facebook.com. Let's just say to or from. And again, it's not just giving you the answer, right? Because that's not teaching. It's giving you the answer, but it's giving you all this context around why that filter works. So it says, like, look, if somebody goes to facebook.com, they got to type facebook.com in their browser. And when they do that, DNS happens. DNS queries happen. So there's a DNS query that goes out to the DNS server that says, where's facebook.com? So if you want to see if someone's attempting to go there, we could look for DNS queries for facebook.com. If you want to see if someone made it there, we would look for HTTP requests and successful connections of facebook.com. It gives us all of that. So let's start with the DNS queries. And we can see, yep, this person did try to go to Facebook, right? So it gives us that information. Now, once that novice brought me back this information, then I might use my subject matter expertise to say, yeah, someone did try to go to Facebook, but it looks like the DNS server lied to them and told them Facebook was at this 177 address, right? That's something my expertise would tell me that novice wouldn't be able to see. But that's where it kind of all works together, because this still cuts our workload down by less than half in most cases. Because I can be doing other more advanced things while not having to stand over the shoulders of this new hire while they're having to learn how to do this, while I'm teaching them to do this. I can give them the basic instructions. ChatGPT can be their coach and kind of give them the syntax and the logic behind why that syntax works. Now, let me show you something that's even more fantastic than that. And this will be a good illustration of where you still need expertise, but it also helps. Now, I've compromised this machine with something, and I'm going to just say, let's run netstat. And I want to see only established connections. So that would be my instruction. Run netstat and only look for established connections. A rookie or novice may not know how to do that. So I could go back to ChatGPT and say, in Windows, what is the netstat syntax to only show established connections. And I give it that prompt. And it gives me what the -N flag and the -A, because you saw me do -AN. So it gives me what those flags do. And then it shows me the find string flag or option here to filter out just the established connections. So what it's telling us is like, look at, if you run just netstat -NA, what you'll get is everything, including UDP and everything else. And let me just show you why that's not what we're trying to do here. So if we just did this, we get all that, right? We don't care about all that. We want to see just the established connections. So it told us very specifically how to do it and why it works. So I'm going to put in what it told me, and it shows me established connections. Now, for those of you that are on this webinar that are new to this, or you're new to cyber, you're not a cyber expert, it may be difficult for you to look at this netstat output and tell me why something's wrong, why there's a cyber attack. But if you're a novice and you now figured out how to get netstat, we can actually take this output. So I'm going to take this exact output and I will caution you again, this is where you don't take work stuff like this and go put that on something like ChatGPT, because there can be confidential work information in here. So this is something you should only do in a practice sandbox isolated environment if you don't have dedicated internal large language models and generative AI that you're working with that your organization has approved. So what I'll do is I'll take this out to ChatGPT and I will simply say, is there any cybersecurity concern with this netstat output? And then I'm going to just shift and paste that output into my prompt. That's right out of netstat. So I submit that prompt. It tells me, hey, so some of the stuff you have there, like these connections are 127.0.0.1 connections, those are fine. They usually mean this. The port 389 connections that you see, that's typical LDAP stuff that has to do with Active Directory, which is something that we use in Windows or in Microsoft networks to help us manage the network and resources. So this is probably LDAP and Active Directory, no big deal there. These are probably ephemeral ports, which means something went out and connected back to those. And then it says, but aside from all that, there is something I'm concerned about. All these normal ports, these other connections don't really say anything bad, but this connection right here needs further investigation. Why? Because it's historically associated with malicious software. So now we have some insights. Okay. So here's where we still need expertise, because we've taken a novice that knew nothing, that's now able to run netstat, get the output, tell ChatGPT to check it. And now that person's able to come to me and say, well, according to ChatGPT, there's something malicious here. And I would agree, like, yeah, someone using the elite port 31337, that's definitely probably malicious. But see, where my subject matter expertise would come in is I would say, if it's a real expert attacker or an APT, they probably wouldn't leave it out in the open like that. They wouldn't be that sloppy with it. So what I would say is this is probably a distraction to what it is they're really doing. So there's something else somewhere that's hiding that I can't see. And this is just a distraction to have me go after that. So this is where you still need the subject matter expertise. You still need experts. But the goal here is not to replace the need for experts or the need for people to do things. But the goal here is we can shorten the learning curve from beginner to being effective and useful in this job role very, very quickly as compared to how we do it without using tools like generative AI. And this is where some of the real advantages start to come in. Now, there are other things, for example, in that packet capture, there's lots of things in there that you can look and find that's wrong. But this is an example of how we're able to use these language models and use tools like ChatGPT to speed up our learning curve. And we could actually, if this was a rootkit or something like that, we've stumbled upon something here that some even seasoned network engineers may not notice that that's something malicious. Or if we had processes running SVC host versus SCV host, because that's a common thing. And what I mean by that, let me just kind of show you. So I'll stop netcat from running here. So I'm going to rename netcat to scvhost.exe. Now, if you look at your Windows running processes, a lot of you know SVC host is the legitimate process, but a common malware thing is they'll do these small substitutions like that with their malicious software to make it so you would overlook that as a running process. So what I'm going to do is run that now. Have it listen on a port and have it do that. So just like we looked at netstat, one common thing is also to just look at your running processes. So if I came in and did task list, right, that's going to show me all my processes. And there they are. So again, I'll take this output, not even all of it. Let's just take this part for the sake of speed here. So I'll take what's on the screen and I'm going to put that in and ask, hey, is there anything I should be concerned about here? And I'm just going to paste that. And I will give it that as my prompt. Now, again, this is not beginner stuff. So it tells me, yeah, you got FileZilla running. So there's an FTP server. There's a mail server running. These things may or may not be bad. If you intended to have a mail server, you intended to have FTP. But look at what it says here. Without knowing the specific roles and responsibilities of the server, it's hard to identify if it's malicious or not. And it even goes in and gives you like the recommendations for how you look at the different PIDs and find out what's wrong there. Now, if you were to ask it, how do I look to see if a process has a connection to it? Or how do I look and see what processes have connections? You can ask it that. You could say, what is the netstat command to see what processes have established connections, because we already looked for established connections. And it'll actually show us that. So we could look and see, we found that process that was listening on port 31337 earlier. Using this prompt, we could now find out what the actual running service is that's got that port open, right? So these are some of the things that you can get really deep down into the rabbit hole really quickly without necessarily knowing everything there is to know about the technology. And the beauty of it is the answers that it gives you puts you in a position to where you can learn and not just kind of follow along. And that's what makes this most exciting for me. And I've built quite a few courses and other things like that that we're getting ready to release around some of these technologies and some of these ideas of how to bring this to a larger group and make it to where people can just learn faster. Because that's what I'm all about, is making it to where the path for people to get from novice to actually being effective and have real utility in a cybersecurity role. I want to shorten that path as much as I can. And I think this technology puts us in position to be able to do that in ways and at speeds we've never been able to do it before. And I think I'll stop right there with the demo.
Awesome. We can go ahead and get into some of the questions here. If anyone has questions for Keatron or about ChatGPT and AI, feel free to drop them in. I see we have a number in this folder here, so I'll go ahead and throw a couple your way, Keatron. So Marianne is asking, how challenging is it to learn how to craft, the right kind of queries to use it ChatGPT for these good purposes? Is it a lot of trial and error, or like any suggestions there for folks looking to get started?
I don't think it's that difficult to learn how to create the prompts, because you got to know what it is you're trying to do to create the prompts. I think the approach should be the people that know how to do this job should be the ones creating the prompts, and then we should be mass producing those prompts for the people that don't know how to produce those prompts. Right? I think that's got to be the approach. So, for example, I can't take and do over the shoulders for 10 of you at the same time. But what I can do is I can write the prompts and give it to all 10 of you and get the same net result as if I did 10 individual sessions with
you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of questions coming in. Just I guess a practical question. William's asking, how did the chatbot know to use that particular pcap file that you're using? Is there any tricks there to get it to work?
I didn't give it the pcap file. I just asked it for the filter. Right? So if I would have taken that filter and put it in any pcap file that had those IPs, it would have given me the same thing. The reason I knew to ask it to filter between those IPs is because what I said was, that's in the instructions. So in that PDF that I opened initially that I would give to a novice, in the instructions, it tells you here are the two problem IPs. But if you didn't have that, then you would need some expertise to be able to look at that and ascertain that.
Kenneth has an interesting question. He says, as someone in the cybersecurity business, how would you identify a new employee that relies heavily on ChatGPT rather than knowing and understanding the job? And, I guess, is that even something you're concerned about? It sounds like you're, encouraging folks to use ChatGPT. So what's the line between relying on the tool versus actually understanding what you're doing?
I mean, it depends on how they're using it, right? Like if I hired someone and they were using it the way that I just demonstrated, I would not have a problem with that. Not at all. Now, if I hired someone and they had on their resume that they could do all these things, but they can't actually do those things, they can just ChatGPT do them, I might have a problem with that. So it just depends on how someone's using it, Like, again, to enhance your ability to get to a point faster, like I don't have a problem with that, especially if you're learning in the process.
Great. Is there so talking about how to use it in a good way, ChatGPT, but Andrew and a few other folks are asking, like what, you talked a little bit, I guess, about stuff you shouldn't put in there. Is there anything you can maybe elaborate more on what you wouldn't want employees or people to do, whether it's accidental or, I guess, malicious?
So let me give you the general rule of thumb. Let me give you the answers in priority. Top priority, first and most important answer to that is ask your company. Because whatever they say you shouldn't put in there is what you shouldn't put in there. Then right below that, I would say, if you don't have guidance there, your logic should be, if it's not something that I don't want to eventually end up on the internet. In other words, if it's data that you would get in trouble or it would cause a problem for you or your organization, If it ended up on the public internet, then don't put it in there. Don't put it in ChatGPT, right? Again, there are other solutions that you can get to put internal to where you're not putting your data out in the public. But if you have that, then your organization would already have that in place. Maybe I'll do another webinar at some point to show the steps to getting something internal, like getting access to a large language model that you can use internally without having to put your stuff out on the public internet. Because it sounds like there's a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, we actually have a couple of questions. Someone's asking, is there a way to have ChatGPT, in an internal way just for your company? Someone else is asking, if there's like closed network or private AI platforms that they can use. So maybe if you could just,
So all large language models could be used privately, right? Like the language model is not the problem; it's the implementation of it. And I wouldn't even say it's a problem, because the fact that they've made it open to the public is how we've got a lot of the innovation that we've gotten. But if you're trying to do something secure and confidently, confidentiality wise, it's not the large language model that makes a difference. It's how it's implemented, right? There are platforms out there that you can subscribe to or buy that have these large language models or these foundation models that you can utilize in this way without your data ever going outside of your little kingdom. This is both through Microsoft and Amazon and Google, whoever for example, your cloud service provider is. All three of them offer solutions like that.
Nicole's asking, excuse me, what about people using it to write scripts? And I know I've seen a lot of really interesting stuff on YouTube of people doing programming, things with that. You have any thoughts on that? People basically doing programming without real programming knowledge?
Well, there's some issue with that. I think there's some ethical issue. There's some responsible AI type issues with that. But there's also some benefit to it. As a matter of fact, there are actual AI innovations by Microsoft, by Google, by Amazon that are actually designed specifically to allow people to allow you to translate natural language to code. And what I mean by that is, when we say natural language, we're talking about you say or type, I want to be able to do this, and that gets translated to code in whatever language, you pick from Python or whatever, from a variety of languages that you choose, and it translates it. So these big vendors are actually creating services that do that intentionally. So I think it's just like anything else. The usage, the intent, and the impact behind what you're doing matters the most. So I don't have a problem with the concept of that, but there has to be some responsibility there. Just like if in the scenario that I just gave, the demo that I gave, it's irresponsible for a subject matter expert to take a novice's ChatGPT answer that there's nothing wrong here other than back orifice being on this machine. That subject matter expert has a responsibility to look at that and say, well, wait a minute. If back orifice is that wide open, there's got to be something hidden deeper. So in the same token, if a beginner is writing code that's complex code and they're passing it on to whoever to implement that code into production or whatever the case may be, there has to be a filter or a firewall there from some experts or some people that know what they're doing to say, yeah, we need to inspect this before we actually take it and put it into production. But on the flip side of that too, people are learning how to code in that way. Like, they have ideas, they put it in, they get the code that does what that idea is, and now they know what that code looks like. And over time, they're actually learning the basics of how Python is structured, or how some of these other languages are structured. So I think there's advantages and disadvantages to that. I don't want to see people putting code into production if they don't know how to code, especially without having somebody else look over it.
We have some questions about, like using ChatGPT for cyber attacks. I know you talked a little bit about on the phishing side. I know a lot of these tools, like Sora, the video tool that just came out, it's only available to red teamers right now. So I know a lot of these companies are doing a lot of red teaming before they release their open stuff up more to the public. But have you heard anything about yeah, I don't know, are there any restrictions on ChatGPT or anything you can talk about from like the offensive side that bad actors might be using it for?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So is the question?
Yeah, well, they're wondering if like basically you can orchestrate, if can I just go in there and tell ChatGPT, create this malware, do a cyber attack for me, kind of
So,
without that
so
knowledge.
yeah. So again, I addressed this a little bit in the beginning, but let me dig into it. Let me peel back the layers just a little bit. So for things like ChatGPT, there are guardrails where it tries to not do those type things if you ask it to, but understand there is a whole host of open source and less regulated large language models and Gen AI tools that don't have those limitations. So we shouldn't really be thinking of it in terms of will ChatGPT let me create malware? We should be thinking in terms of there's definitely some large language model that's generative AI out there that will let me create malware. So I think the answer to that is yes, maybe not ChatGPT specifically, but you shouldn't sleep better just off that because there's others that will allow you to do that.
Yeah, are you
Somebody
paying
said,
for
"Give me a list." Somebody says, "Give me a list of the ones that." Well, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, someone's asking if ChatGPT is free, or was the stuff you were demoing? Do you have a paid account, or can you talk more about that?
So I have several paid accounts. I have a research account as well that I was lucky able to get my hands on. But everything that I just demonstrated, you can do with the free account. You don't need a paid for account to do anything that I just did.
And we have a number of questions.
And I
Oh, go ahead.
intentionally built the demonstration around not doing things that requires a pro license.
Yeah, we have a number of questions, I think, about like the awareness side, AI being used for social engineering and phishing, and, how can, I think this is probably the big concern I hear from everybody, especially, with all the new stuff that's coming out, but just like, how can we train the average user to detect and be better, with these just increased social engineering attacks and AI use cases? Any advice for organizations looking to train employees on that?
Well, so for one, like look at security awareness and training products and look at the ones that are doing innovations in the area of trying to make the phishing attacks be more realistic. Like we're doing research now in our product where we're looking at ways to automate the phishing campaigns and make them more um, specific to that individual user, right? So there's ways to do that, and I think the first step is you just have to make sure you have a security awareness program in place. And I would even say, as part of that security awareness program, you should start maybe looking to get answers to questions about responsible AI.
Yeah, there also seems to be a few different questions just about how their company should approach AI. I mean, it sounds like the gist I'm getting from these questions is maybe people aren't getting guidance, from the top down. People are asking, should we ban ChatGPT in our organization? Like questions like that. So, yeah, I guess if you don't have that kind of directive coming from the top down, which I suspect a lot of organizations maybe aren't being as proactive, do you have any advice for people who are?
Yeah, so I would say if your organization is not giving that guidance, I would say you should reach out and make the suggestion that that organization create a group that has representatives from business, have representatives from the legal team, have representatives from product team if you have a product team, representatives from marketing, from different groups in the org, but specifically leadership in the business and legal. These are like two really important ones to have in this committee or group to where you can bring these questions and talk about these things and get the right guidance. Because I don't think any one department or organization in a company has the ability to give good guidance on their own. It takes a collective of different groups from different parts of the org to think about this problem in a more holistic way. So if you don't have that exists, I would say maybe you should spearhead and try to get that organized to where you have that structure in place to be able to use it, in a way that is suitable for the organization. If you don't have the ability to do that, the next best thing is before you use it for something, draw up like a use case of how you want to use it. Go to your manager or whoever you report to, and get permission. Like, make sure that you're not doing something that they would be, not okay with.
Yeah, we also have a couple of questions, career related. Someone's asking, is ChatGPT inevitable? A couple of people asking about, how this AI is going to impact, jobs, and is there any way leadership can assure employees that AI is not going to take over their job? I know one of the quotes that I've seen going around a lot. I forget who said it, but basically, AI is not going to take your job, but people who use AI better than you do are going to, take your job. So that's kind of how I view it, but I'm curious how you think about the job market.
Yeah, well, definitely the NICE framework, or the NIST framework for responsible AI, is a good place for any organization or any person to start. Go read that. If if your organization is a Microsoft Azure organization, you go read up on Azure OpenAI. It's a whole service. If you're an Amazon AWS customer and you're thinking about it, go read up on Amazon Bedrock. It's their new generative AI, service. And there's many other generative AI services and capabilities that you build on top of that. But go look at those and read up on it, understand what it is. There's a lot of talk on both sides of that about responsible AI and that type thing. But yeah, I definitely think that that's kind of where you want to start with that, and think it through in that regard. Like, understand the technology first, and then try to build a program around it. Don't just dive into it.
Awesome. We have a number of other questions. Nathan's asking if AI is going to be part of the new Security Plus exam. I think we actually asked that question to Patrick Lane on our Security Plus webinar, which we did back in November, where he talked about the new exam. I believe he said there's a couple of spots where in the updated 701 version that they're incorporating some AI. I don't know if you have any insight into that.
So let me just say this without saying too much. Because I am working with several certification bodies on some of these things. So I would imagine that most cybersecurity certifications are going to evolve to having some AI stuff in there. Also, understand that there are going to be eventually some AI certifications that come out. And I'll just leave that hanging out there. We'll talk about that more in about 3 or 4 months. We'll have a webinar for that statement, Jeff.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a couple other questions just about people not wanting to use GTP4 for the risk of privacy, and having trouble, I guess, building their own, and training their own internal environments. And we have someone else just kind of asking for a high level explanation of how these large language models operate. So maybe just summarizing, how they work, and then is it possible, if you don't want to use ChatGPT 4 for privacy concerns, is it feasible to build your own or use other ones, or any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, essentially the large language models are just, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big collection, big databases of text and, our natural language and stuff like that. And what happens is, as people build these models out, there are other technologies that you put on top of that model to get whatever kind of usages you want out of it. If you want to do natural language processing to be able to do things like what most of us do with ChatGPT, that's probably the most I would say accurate usage, because we've been doing that for a long time. But now, with vector databases and other things, it allows us to get insights and stuff from images and videos. So it's, there's different, the large language model, and I almost don't even want to say that, because if you talk to other vendors like Amazon, they'll say foundation models. But what I would say is, just think of it as a collection or databases of text, our language, different languages, put into a database. And the AI is able to using natural language processing and other techniques, get insights and context around that data. As a matter of fact, we can give it input data and ask it questions, and it can use that whole database and that language model and give us back answers with context around it, as you saw when I was using it earlier, right? And there are many, like, people, there's Llama, there's so many language models out there. I encourage people to go out and try others other than just ChatGPT, just to get yourself exposed and see what's out there, because I think you will like some better than you like others for different tasks. They're trained on huge data sets. This is why it's called large language models. They're built specifically on machine learning, and it's really a type of neural network that we, in the world of machine learning, we call the transformer model. But that's kind of the basics. That's the high level of what it is. And ChatGPT is just a chatbot, an application that allows you to access their specific large language model in a way that is very intuitive and easy to use.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate all the great questions from everyone. Apologies we can't get to them all. Maybe we can wrap up with this one here from Amy. She's wondering for people on the call, whether you're a beginner or have more advanced skills and you want to start learning more about AI and how to use it, is there any additional resources or guidance you can provide them on where to go?
Yeah, so one place that you can go is just go to the OpenAI. They have like great documentation on there. Amazon has good documentation and videos on usages and different plan usages. So does Microsoft. Google has some good documentation out there as well. I think when we look at the future of these large language models and generative AI, what's going to give us the capability to do some of the things we're doing is going to be the foundation of cloud services, because we can get access to processing and compute power that we just can't have locally, right, without spending lots of money. So looking at what some of the cloud services vendors are doing, I think is going to be a good insight to what's coming up and what's possible. I would almost want to, dive into quantum computing a little bit and how that's going to like put this in hyperdrive, but that's another topic we'll save for later as well. But definitely look at some of the leaders, look at the OpenAI documentation and research, because that's the stuff that I read. Like I don't read a lot of product stuff. I just go look at the raw documentation on how the technology works. And that gives me a more holistic understanding. And then, I'm able to go in and build, my own chatbots and things like that. And I believe most people on this call could do the same, because most of these vendors have made it really easy to build what you all are asking for. Like those of you that are asking for how do we get access to these large language models without going out to and putting stuff on the public web, it's not as hard as you may think. And I think if you research that a little bit, you'll find that.
Yeah, and I would just add for folks who want to, basically do a little bit of hands-on what you were doing just now in your demo. You do have your, I think it's applied ChatGPT for cybersecurity learning path, right? So you can always pop in there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that source. I do have a course in skills where you actually do what I was just demonstrating, and the files are in there that you can open and go and investigate and find stuff on your own based on using ChatGPT as your prompt.
Yeah, and that's linked. It's linked in the related content tab if anyone wants to click on it and learn more about that. But yeah, we are over time, so we're going to have to wrap up. Appreciate all the great questions and everyone for joining us today. We do have a series of AWS webinars coming up that Keatron's going to be talking through. We have a new partnership with them for live training. So if you're interested in learning more about AWS, training and certifications, we'll be kicking those off next Wednesday. But yeah, appreciate everyone for joining us. Big thank you to Keatron for sharing your expertise. And as we wrap up, a short survey will appear. Greatly appreciate if you take a minute to fill that out so we know what topics you all are interested in next. Thanks. Have a great day.